How's it going, Thieves fans? What a weekend for LAT. Today we're going to be talking about how the Thieves were able to take the Major 4 tournament in back-to-back years. Starting off the tournament, the Thieves faced off against Minnesota Rocker for the second time in 2 weeks, and this matchup was just like the first time they played them before the actual LAN event. This time the Thieves only lost one map, and that was their Expo Control. But the Thieves still looked really good, and it was a great start for the Thieves to be able to stay in this winner's bracket of the tournament. They were actually able to make the entire Minnesota Rocker team go negative throughout the entire series. So for the first hardpoint, they had a Fortress hardpoint where Thieves were able to take the win 250 to 187. And again, 3 players on Rocker were negative, whereas everybody on the Thieves broke at least even, if not positive. Kenny, of course, started off hot, 31 and 22 with a 1.41 KD, which throughout the entire tournament he played extremely well. But to start it off, him and Envoy, both starting off hot, having that sub duo, be able to push the pace, that was something that we really needed, especially looking forward, going up against a team like Optic, who has a very strong sub duo. The second map was an LSCLO Search and Destroy, which was basically a Thieves masterclass. It really started off with Drazah being able to push the pace and dominating in the Search and Destroy, which again he continued to do throughout pretty much the entire tournament. And in this matchup specifically, him and Kenny both played extremely well. Kenny going 9 and 3, obviously having a 3.0 KD, which is pretty crazy. And then Drazah being 9 and 7. So having both of those guys start off really hot in the searches was a good sign, because that was the thing that the Thieves really needed to work on the most out of all of their game modes. So them being to a point where their Search and Destroy has elevated has really pushed them to the point that they are currently at. And they've even said themselves they don't know if they're at their full potential yet. So that's a really good sign if you're a Thieves fan. We can't wait to see what comes next. But the only map they ended up losing was the Himmelmac Expo. They lost it 3-2. It was pretty back and forth. 3-player on the Rocker had 30 plus kills, and Drazah and Octane played a little slow on that map. So the AR duo on a open map kind of made it a little difficult. But it was all right. Nothing too crazy to worry about, because then we went on to the Greenberg Hotel hardpoint, where the Thieves ended up closing out the series 250 to 182. And in that map, Kenny was the only one who ended up going negative, going 15 and 23. But Octane had a really solid map, being 28 and 16. On the Rocker side, Bance was the only one to break even, and everybody else had a negative KD. I think this really helped the Thieves push that hardpoint and be able to take the first matchup they had of the entire tournament. Now, the second matchup was the one that I was really looking forward to the most, especially after seeing that we were going to be facing Faze. This was something that I was extremely nervous for, because obviously I really wanted Thieves to dominate Faze based off of how Faze reacted to the last time they beat Thieves, and knowing that the Thieves had a challenge to take on these guys, and I really just wanted to see them chirp back. I knew that they were coming in hot trying to beat these guys, and Faze have really dropped off, as I've said before in previous videos. So this was a perfect opportunity for the Thieves to be able to bite back and kind of get the last laugh in a sense. And looking back on the stats right now, I did not realize, but throughout the entire matchup, everybody on Faze was negative, which is really crazy. Kenny was the only one who ended up going negative. Of course, Drazah had a great series, 1.3 KD. I mean, he wanted it bad. I think he had even said that he was not going to let himself lose to Faze again. And, it showed in this matchup. Thieves ended up taking it 3-1. The only map they ended up losing was the first hardpoint, which Slasher was negative. He was the only one on Faze that was negative. Simp went 29 and 26 with a 1.2 KD, or 1.12, sorry. And Kenny and Envoy both had a slow start in that first hardpoint, but luckily they were able to come back and take the Search and Destroy. It was another Asilo where the Thieves again went 6 and 2, and everybody on Faze was negative except for Celium. He was the only one who had a 1.0 KD, and Drazah went absolutely huge. He was 11 and 4, and he had a couple clutches. One was the 1v2 where he did a 360 turn on I believe Slasher, which of course hyped me up a lot. Drazah started yelling right away. That was a huge bounce back map for the Thieves. They really needed it. After them losing the first hard point, it definitely concerned me a little bit, but it was a good sight to see that they took a search and destroy against a pretty solid search and destroy team in a fairly dominant fashion. So then we have the Greenberg Hotel Control. That was the map 3 where the Thieves ended up taking that 3-1. This was another map where Kenny played a little slow. I think this series he had a little bit of a rough series, but Drazah broke even, and Octane and Envoy really stepped up in this one. But you know, they've been dominant in control this entire major, so really not too much of a surprise in my opinion. Again, another big map win. I figured this was going to be a win for the Thieves. They've been a lot better at control than Faze has. Faze's respawns have really kind of died out, and they haven't been great at control in the first place. So big wins out of Thieves to go up 2-1 in the series, and they closed it out on a Hydro, which I knew was kind of Thieves map. That was where I figured, okay, this is where the Thieves are going to shine, and that's exactly what they did. Again, Kenny the only one negative on the Thieves, and Drazah with a 1.8 KD going 28 and 15, and Envoy 26 and 14 with a 1.86. They really led the push for the Thieves there. And the only person positive on Faze was Simp with 23 and 22 and a 1.05 KD. So Thieves ended up taking that one 250 to 178. And sure enough, right after the Thieves were able to take that one, Drazah stands up and started yelling at him. And man, did that feel good to watch. I don't know about anybody else, but as a Thieves fan, that felt really good. So that was super exciting. And that pushed Thieves into the winners finals. The winners finals was Optic going up against LA Thieves. And this was another 3-1 victory for Thieves. But it was really stressful, especially with the first map being as close as it was. They started off on a Hydro hardpoint, which again, I know that's kind of the Thieves map, but Optic has been pretty good in hardpoints, and they were pretty good on Hydro as well. Crazy enough, on this hardpoint, Thieves were actually getting outslayed and only had Kenny going positive with a 1.2 KD, 33 and 27, whereas Optic had 3 players positive and only 1 negative, which was Hook, going 20 and 28. Next up, we had a Fortress Search and Destroy, where the Thieves were able to take it again 6-2. Something that still impresses me is how much the Thieves have been able to improve on their Search and Destroy. They forced Optic to have 3 people negative, Dashy being the only one positive, going 7 and 6, whereas Drazah had another great performance, being 8 and 3 with a 2.67 KD. And Envoy played pretty well as well with a 1.5 KD, going 6 and 4. Kenny had a little bit of a slower map, same with Octane, but nothing too crazy. I mean, the Thieves, like I said, Thieves took it 6-2, so they were able to handle their business when they needed to. Hook and Shotzi both had a pretty rough performance, going 3 and 6 and 3 and 5. Again, shutting down that sub duo was absolutely huge. Going into the third map, this was the Expo Control, the only map that Thieves ended up losing in this matchup. The entire squad of Optic was positive, with Shotzi being 30 and 26 and Ghosty 25 and 19. They were probably their 2 top performers. And for the Thieves, Octane was the only one to go positive. They ended up taking it to an extra round, which they probably shouldn't have because Optic was playing pretty well. Thieves really couldn't get too much going. But they were able to kind of sneak away 1 round win. And then they had an opportunity to take it to a round 5, but they just couldn't close it out. Drazah had a really rough map. He was 11 and 24. That was probably his worst map of the entire tournament, I would say, at least from what I can remember. He really just couldn't buy a kill, and it was really unfortunate. I think if he were able to have gotten a little more kills here and there, I think that this could have been a 3-0 potentially. But, you know, it's all right. We'll take what we can get. They were able to improve on their control going into the grand finals, which we will get to in a little bit. But now let's move on to the game 4 hardpoint, which was a Mercado. And again, a little nerve-wracking going into this, knowing that this is kind of Optic's playhouse. You know, they've been playing really well on Mercado, but so have Thieves. And so I knew that at least it was better than a Fortress hardpoint, which again, we will get into later. Thieves ended up having everybody go positive, and Drazah played really well, 28 and 15 with a 1.87 KD, and Dashy was the only one positive on Optic, going 24 and 22 with a 1.09 KD. So again, Thieves were able to slow down the sub duo and really just open up a lot of space on the map, and they ended up taking that one 250 to 149, probably the biggest hardpoint win for them. And it was at the right time. You know, everybody started frying, everybody was moving. These guys were just team shooting everything. It was really hard for Optic to get these breaks, and Thieves were actually getting holds, which is something that I have mentioned in previous videos as well, that was something they needed to work on in order to beat these upper echelon teams consistently. And it was good to see that they were able to work on that in that off time before the major tournament, and you know, implement it into this matchup against Optic, which was definitely the biggest matchup they had in the tournament. With Thieves taking the winners finals, that meant Optic dropped down into the losers finals, where they ended up playing Faze, and they ultimately ended up winning to bounce back into the grand finals, where Thieves were able to play them in a best of 7 now instead of a best of 5. The first map in this second matchup against Optic was a Hydro hardpoint, where the Thieves ended up winning it 250 to 200, and they were able to force Optic to only have Shotzi go positive, being 27 and 23 with a 1.17 KD, and 3 players on Thieves were able to go positive, that being Drazah, Kenny, and Octane. Envoy was the only one that had a little bit of a slow start. So that was a good start to this matchup against Optic for the second time in this tournament. Next up, they played a Hotel Search and Destroy, which this was the first map that Optic was able to take, where they ended up winning 6-3. And this one was a little bit of a slower map for Drazah, not terrible. He was 5 and 6, but based off some of his previous search performances, this was something that he's kind of been the one leading the searches. And when he has kind of a middle ground of a map against a top echelon team, you know, it might be a little difficult for them to win. But Kenny was 9 and 6. He was the only one to go positive for the Thieves. Octane 4 and 8 had a little bit of a rough map. And then for Optic, they had Ghosty, who was 8 and 6, and Shotzi, who was 11 and 5. It was tough. Thieves had a couple opportunities that they could have pushed it a little farther and just weren't able to close it out. But, you know, this is a best of 7, so them losing one search wasn't the end of the world. Little stressful, though, knowing that the next matchup was the Expo Control, where the Thieves had just previously lost to Optic 3-1. Luckily, this time for Thieves, they were able to flip the script, and they ended up winning 3-1 themselves, where Drazah was 22 and 18, Octane was 22 and 18 as well, Kenny was 23 and 21, Envoy was 20 and 17, entire team going positive. Things you love to see out of the Thieves going into a map that, like I said before, they had just lost to this squad. So that was a really good push to take them to a 2-1 lead. Now they went into a Fortress hardpoint. I really didn't think that this was the best matchup that they could have done. Obviously, I'm not in their camp. I don't know how they come up with their, you know, their bans on maps, but I knew that Fortress is Optic's playground when it comes to hardpoint. Like, they've been 100-point clubbing many teams on this map, and my biggest concern was this is the perfect map for Hook and Shotzi to really kind of get the flow going and to loosen up and just get lost. And that's not something you want going up against Optic, especially when they started off a little slow in 2 of the earlier maps. So knowing that this was the map that was coming up, it just felt a little weird. I figured, why not, you know, take your chances on a different map where, you know, even if you've lost it before, you might have a higher likelihood of winning it. And then you maybe win 4-1 instead of 4-2 or even 4-3. The Thieves lost 250 to 138. It was probably their worst hardpoint loss in the tournament. Octane was the only one who ended up going positive. He was 22 and 19. You know, he played really well on that map, but unfortunately nobody else on the Thieves was really able to get anything going. Dashy and Hook both played really well. Hook, again, not the guy you want to get heated up for Optic. Once that guy is locked in, you know, he's scary to play against. So that one was a tough loss. That's where Optic tied the series 2-2. And the next up was a Search and Destroy on Asilo. This was where things were a little scary for me, knowing that series was tied up and now Thieves are going into another search. And with their previous history on search, especially on an Asilo search, you know, I really didn't know how things were going to go. I knew that they've kind of improved a little bit in this game mode, but just knowing, like I said, the history of everything, it was a little concerning. But luckily, Thieves were able to take it 6-4, where Drazah ended up breaking even, and Octane and Kenny both had 8 and 9 kills. That was huge out of Kenny, especially because he had a little bit of a rough search going into this tournament. That was a good pushback. Ghosty was the only one to go positive for Optic, being 8 and 6. Dashy broke even, being 8 and 8. And Hook and Shotzi had a little bit of a rough performance. Hook was 3 and 7, and Shotzi was 5 and 8. So again, shutting down those sub players, I think really helped push the pace, which that leads us into the final map, which was a CeeLo control. And this one was kind of back and forth. Thieves ended up taking it 3-2, where they ended up closing out the entire tournament. But it was a little back and forth. You know, going to a round 5, Drazah was negative. He was 19 and 23, and Envoy was 21 and 24 with a 0.8 KD. Something that in that sort of a situation, you don't really want to see it. But luckily, Kenny was probably up to his MVP self this map. He was ridiculous. It seemed like he couldn't miss. He was shooting with both the Vaz and the tack, and just he looked gross. And if he can play like that consistently, the Thieves are practically unbeatable when everybody's on. Kenny was 30 and 21. Octane had a solid map as well. And the only player positive for Optic was Ghosty at 24 and 23. Shotzi broke even, and Dashy was 16 and 21. A little bit of a rough map for him, and really at unfortunate timing. That's where the Thieves were able to close out the series and end up taking the championship, which Thieves were able to do in back-to-back years for Major 4, and they are the first team ever to break the Champ's Curse. That's going to do it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button and ring the bell so that way you get notified every time I post a new video. Also, I would appreciate if you guys go and check out the Thieves Talk Twitter. That's where I'm posting updates on matches, and sometimes I'll post clips and things like that as well. We're up to 230 followers and we're slowly growing, so I would appreciate you guys going and checking that out. That'll be linked in the description down below. Also, if you guys want to check out my personal Twitter, I will have that linked underneath the Thieves Talk page. With that being said, that's going to do it for me, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. See ya.